On Mother's Day, my greedy daughter-in-law raised a toast with a smile. To the old lady taking a nice little vacation in the nursing home. Everyone at the table laughed. I stayed silent. On Monday, I locked the house and left for a 6-month cruise. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. To the old lady who's going to take a vacation in a nursing home. Amelia raised her glass, a smug smile spreading across her face as she looked directly at me. The table erupted with laughter. My son Brian, his wife Amelia, their 2 teenagers, and even my sister Patricia, who had joined us for Mother's Day lunch. All of them laughing at my expense. I sat there, fork suspended midair, a forced smile plastered on my face while something inside me shattered. 61 years old, and this is what I'd become to them. A punchline, a burden, the old lady destined for a nursing home. Come on, Mom. It's just a joke, Brian said, noticing my momentary stillness. He patted my hand with casual dismissal, the way you might comfort a child who didn't get the punchline. I nodded, took a sip of water, and changed the subject. The roast turned. Out well, didn't it? But inside, I was drowning. Each breath felt like swallowing glass. I'd spent 3 days preparing this meal, cleaning my modest house until it sparkled, cooking Brian's favorite dishes, even using the good china I only brought out for special occasions. All for this? To be mocked at my own table on Mother's Day? The rest of lunch passed in a blur. I smiled at the appropriate times, served dessert, accepted my store-bought card with painted flowers and a generic message. I even laughed when Amelia complained about how her mother received a spa weekend while I got just a card. Well, not everyone can afford fancy gifts, I said lightly, though the barb was intentional. I'd loaned them money for their down payment. Last year, money that was supposed to be my retirement cushion. Money they promised to repay but never mentioned again. After they left, hurrying away to celebrate with Amelia's mother, I stood in my kitchen surrounded by dirty dishes and leftover food. The silence was deafening. I picked up a plate and suddenly couldn't hold back anymore. Tears spilled down my cheeks, hot and angry. For 10 years, I'd watched Amelia slowly push me to the margins of my son's life. 10 years of missed calls, canceled plans, and thinly veiled insults. 10 years of being treated like an inconvenience by the child I'd raised alone after his father died when Brian was only 8. I thought of the nights I'd worked double shifts as a nurse to put Brian through college. The promotions I'd turned down because they would have meant moving away from him. The retirement I'd delayed to help with the grandchildren when they were babies. All those sacrifices, and for what? To be told I belonged in a nursing home? I washed the dishes methodically, my mind racing through memories. Last Christmas, when my gift was forgotten in the car. My birthday, when they showed up 3 hours late. The grandchildren's recitals where I was seated in the back row while Amelia's parents got front row seats. When had I become so invisible, so disposable? I dried my hands and walked through my small house, seeing it suddenly through their eyes. The outdated furniture I kept because it still worked fine. The garden I tended because it gave me joy. The photo albums full of memories that no one ever asked to see anymore. My gaze landed on the travel brochures I'd collected over the years. Dreams I'd put aside because Brian and his family always needed something. A new car. Help with mortgage payments. Money for the kids' summer camps. I picked up a glossy pamphlet for a Mediterranean cruise. 6 months around the world, stopping at ports I'd only read about in books. It had seemed like an impossible fantasy, but now, I sat down at my kitchen, table, brochure in hand, and made a decision. No more being the convenient grandmother who babysits on demand. No more being the bank that never expects repayment. No more being the punchline to cruel jokes. If they thought I belonged in a nursing home, let them see how they managed without me. I opened my laptop, found the cruise website, and stared at the screen. My hands trembled as I entered my credit. Card information. 6 months away. 6 months to rediscover who I was beyond mother and grandmother. 6 months to decide if I wanted to come back at all. As I pressed confirm booking, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time in years, I was choosing myself. That night, I slept better than I had in a decade, dreaming of ocean horizons and distant shores. When my phone rang the next morning, Brian asking if I could watch the kids after school all week because their regular sitter quit, I didn't answer. Instead, I started making lists. Things to pack, bills to prepay, arrangements to make. The cruise departed in 2 weeks. Until then, I would say nothing. Let them think everything was normal. Let them take me for granted one last time. They wanted to joke about sending me away. They never imagined I would actually go. The 2 weeks after Mother's Day passed in a whirlwind of quiet preparation. Each day I woke with newfound purpose, executing my plan with methodical precision while maintaining a facade of normalcy to the outside world. First, I visited my bank. The teller raised her eyebrows when I withdrew a significant portion of my savings, but I simply smiled and mentioned travel plans. Next was a visit to my attorney to update my will and grant my sister Patricia limited power of attorney while I was away. The cruise line recommended such precautions for extended voyages. 6 months is a long time, Donna, Patricia said when I finally told her my plans over coffee at her house. Her eyes widened with both concern and a hint of admiration. What about Brian and the kids? They'll manage, I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Brian has Amelia's parents on speed dial. Patricia sipped her coffee, studying me. This is about what happened at Mother's Day, isn't it? I traced the rim of my mug with my finger. That was just the final straw. I've been disappearing from their lives for years. They just haven't noticed. My sister reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I've watched it happen. I should have said something sooner. It's not your fault, I assured her. But I need you to promise not to tell them where I've gone. Not until I'm ready, she promised, though reluctantly. Patricia had always been my confidant, the only one who understood how much I'd sacrificed for Brian after his father died. Next came the practical matters. I arranged for my mail to be forwarded to Patricia's address and set up automatic payments for my utilities. I found a neighbor's son to mow my lawn and check on the house periodically. I made copies of important documents and packed a small suitcase with essentials. All the while, life continued as usual. Brian called twice, once to ask me to babysit, I claimed a doctor's appointment, and once to borrow my stand mixer for a bake sale. Amelia was organizing. I dropped it off when I knew they wouldn't be home. Neither of them noticed anything different about me or asked how I was doing after Mother's Day. It only confirmed what I already knew. I had become invisible. 3 days. Before my departure, I visited my safety deposit box at the bank. Inside was my most precious possession, a small velvet box containing my mother's pearls. I'd always planned to give them to my granddaughter Emma on her 16th birthday, but that was still years away. I held the necklace in my palm, the pearls warm and luminous. Should I leave them behind? What if something happened to me during the voyage? Would they even care enough to look for this heirloom? After some reflection, I tucked the pearls into my travel case. Some decisions could wait until I'd had time to heal. The day before my departure, I cleaned my house thoroughly. I washed every dish, dusted every surface, and changed all the linens. I wanted everything perfect, though I wasn't sure why. Perhaps it was the nurse in me, always preparing for contingencies. Perhaps it was the mother, still trying to prove her worth. That evening, I sat in my garden watching the sunset, breathing in the scent of the roses I'd tended for 20 years. Would they still be alive when I returned? Would anyone notice if they withered? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I walked through each room of my house, touching familiar objects, saying a silent goodbye. The quilt my grandmother made, the rocking chair where I'd nursed Brian through countless illnesses, the wall of family photos that charted his growth from toddler to man. So many memories contained within these walls, so much love given, so little returned. Morning came with startling brightness. I showered, dressed, and ate a light breakfast. My taxi to the airport was scheduled for 10 a.m. I had one last task to complete. I wrote a brief note and left it on. The refrigerator, secured with a magnet shaped like a lighthouse that Brian had given me years ago from some forgotten vacation. I've decided to travel for a while. The house is yours to check on. Don't worry about me. I'll be in touch when I'm ready. Mom, no mention of where I was going. No apologies. No expected return date. At exactly 9:58 a.m., I locked my front door and rolled my suitcase to the curb, where the taxi was already waiting. As we pulled away, I didn't look back at the house that had been my home for 35 years. Instead, I looked forward, toward an unknown horizon. My phone buzzed in my purse. Brian's ringtone. Chamantawar. Was when he typically called to ask if I could pick up the kids from their activities. I silenced it without answering. By the time he realized something was wrong, I would be over the Atlantic. At the airport, I moved through security and found my gate with the efficiency of someone who has spent a lifetime being organized for others. Sitting in the boarding area, I felt strangely calm. No guilt, no second thoughts, just a quiet certainty that I was finally doing something for myself. When they called my route aboard, I stood up smoothly, ticket in hand. A young mother struggled past me, juggling a baby and too many carry-ons. Without thinking, I helped her stow her bags. "Thank you," she said with genuine gratitude. My mother was supposed to travel with us, but she canceled at the last minute. I don't know how I'll manage alone. "You'll figure it out," I told her with a gentle smile. People usually do when they have to. As I settled into my seat by the window, I realized that's exactly what Brian and his family would have to do now. Figure it out without me. Learn to manage the logistics of their lives without their convenient safety net. The plane taxied down, the runway, gathering speed until suddenly we were airborne, the ground falling away beneath us. I watched as my city grew smaller, turning into a patchwork of tiny buildings and roads before disappearing completely beneath a blanket of clouds. 6 months. 6 months to rediscover myself. 6 months to decide if I would ever go back. I closed my eyes and let go. The first 3 days on the cruise ship, I barely left my cabin. Exhaustion from years of giving myself away had finally caught up with me. I slept deeply, waking only to eat the room service I ordered and to stand on my small private balcony, watching the endless blue horizon where ocean met sky. On the 4th. Morning. Guilt arrived like an unwelcome visitor. What kind of mother abandons her family without warning? What kind of grandmother disappears without saying goodbye? I picked up my phone several times, my finger hovering over Brian's number. But then I remembered Amelia's smirk as she raised that glass. To the old lady who's going to take a vacation in a nursing home. The way everyone laughed. The way my son, my only child whom I'd raised alone after his father died, had joined in. I put the phone down each time. On day 5, a gentle knock interrupted my self-imposed isolation. "Housekeeping," a voice called cheerfully. When I opened the door, I found not only the housekeeper, but also a short, silver-haired woman with bright blue eyes and a determined expression. "You've missed 5 activities you signed up for," she announced without preamble, consulting a folded paper in her hand. "The watercolor class, 2 shore excursions, the book club, and the ballroom dancing lesson." I blinked, taken aback. "I'm sorry, there must be some mistake. I didn't sign up for any activities." The woman raised an eyebrow. "Well, someone using cabin 8217 did, and since that's you." she extended her hand. "I'm Ruth Abernathy, retired art teacher and your apparent activity partner." I hesitantly shook her hand. "Donna Mitchell, and I really didn't sign up for anything." Ruth laughed. "The cruise director must have mixed up the cabin numbers, but since we're here now, would you like to join today's watercolor class? It starts in 30 minutes on the Lido deck." My instinct was to decline politely, to retreat back into my cocoon of solitude and self-pity. But something in Ruth's kind eyes and no-nonsense demeanor reminded me why I'd come on this journey in the first place. Not to hide away, but to rediscover myself. "I haven't painted since high school," I admitted. Ruth smiled. "Perfect. No bad habits to unlearn." 90 minutes later, I was sitting before an easel on the open deck, attempting to capture the dazzling play of sunlight on waves. My painting looked nothing like the ocean, more like someone had dropped a blue and white kaleidoscope. But I didn't care. For the first time in years, I was creating something just for myself. "You have an interesting sense of color," Ruth commented, studying my work. "Unconventional, but powerful." I laughed. "That's a polite way of saying it's terrible." "Not terrible," she corrected firmly. "Emotional. You paint what you feel, not just what you see. That's rare." After class, Ruth insisted I join her for lunch, and I found myself sharing a table with her and 4 other passengers, all women traveling alone, all over 60, all with stories of their own. There was Margaret, a widow discovering solo travel after 47 years of marriage. Helen, celebrating her retirement from a legal career. Sophia, on a journey of healing after breast cancer. And Elizabeth, fulfilling a lifelong dream after raising 5 children alone. "What about you, Donna?" Elizabeth asked as we enjoyed dessert. "What brings you on a 6-month voyage?" The question caught me off guard. What should I tell these strangers? That I was running away? That my family had wounded me so deeply I couldn't bear to be near them? "I'm trying to remember who I am," I said finally, surprising myself with the honesty. When you spend decades being someone's mother, someone's grandmother, sometimes you forget there was a you before all that. 5 pairs of eyes met mine with perfect understanding. No judgment, no platitudes, just recognition of a shared truth. "Well, then," Ruth said, raising her glass, "to remembering ourselves." We clinked glasses, and something tight in my chest began to loosen. The days that followed took on a rhythm. Mornings were for painting with Ruth, who praised my emotional landscapes with genuine enthusiasm. Afternoons were for exploration, both of the ship and of the ports we visited. Evenings were for dining with my new friends, sharing stories and laughter. In Naples, Ruth and I wandered through narrow streets lined with history, sampling gelato and practicing our terrible Italian. In Barcelona, I bought colorful scarves for all of us and learned to dance flamenco, my body remembering how to move with joy. In Marseille, I sat at a cafe for 3 hours, sketching passing faces and writing in the journal I'd started keeping. "You're different today," Ruth observed as we sailed away from Greece toward our next destination. "There's color in your cheeks, light in your eyes." I smiled, realizing she was right. The constant knot of tension I'd carried between my shoulders for years had begun to unravel. The heaviness in my chest when I thought of Brian and his family had lightened somewhat. But at night, alone in my cabin, I still checked my phone. Dozens of missed calls from Brian. Increasingly frantic text messages. "Mom, where are you? This isn't funny. Call me. The kids are asking about you." "Mom, please, we're worried. Are you punishing me for something?" I read each message but didn't respond. Not yet. I wasn't ready to let reality intrude on the new self I was discovering. A self who painted with bold colors, who made friends easily, who laughed without restraint, a self who was healing. One evening, about 2 months into the voyage, I was sitting on my balcony, painting the sunset, when Ruth knocked on my door. "Special delivery," she announced, holding up a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. I thought we should celebrate. What are we celebrating? I asked, letting her in. Ruth filled our glasses and handed one to me. Your first piece in the ship's gallery. Jean-Claude was quite taken with your storm painting. It's being displayed in tomorrow's exhibition. I nearly spilled my wine. What? That's not possible. I'm an amateur. An amateur with raw talent, Ruth corrected, and more importantly, with something to say. She clinked her glass against mine. To new beginnings, Donna. As we sipped our wine and watched darkness settle over the ocean, I realized something profound. For the first time in decades, I wasn't defined by my relationship to others. I wasn't Brian's mother or Emma and Jason's grandmother. I was just Donna. And that was enough. Brian Mitchell stared at his mother's empty house, the silence inside unsettling him more than he cared to admit. 3 months had passed since she'd disappeared, leaving nothing but a vague note on the refrigerator. 3 months of unanswered calls, ignored texts, and growing unease. Any sign of her? Amelia asked from the car, not bothering to get out. Her impatience was evident in the drumming of her fingers against the steering wheel. No, Brian replied, locking the door behind him. The garden was overgrown now, the rose bushes his mother had tended so carefully beginning to wilt from neglect. The neighbor boy she'd apparently hired to mow the lawn wasn't much interested in the flowers. I told you we should just call the police, Amelia said, as he slid into the passenger seat. Brian shook his head. And tell them what? That my 61-year-old mother left a note saying she's traveling and doesn't want to be contacted? They'd laugh us out of the station. Well, this is getting ridiculous. She's clearly doing this for attention. Brian felt a flash of irritation. Or maybe she's genuinely taking a trip. Mom never traveled when I was growing up. She always said someday she would. Right after your father died? With a child to raise? That would have been irresponsible. Amelia's tone was dismissive. I meant later, when I was in college. Brian stared out the window as they drove away from his childhood home. She got offered a position at that hospital in Phoenix. Better pay, better hours. But she turned it down to stay close to me. And you think she's been harboring resentment? About that for 20 years? Amelia rolled her eyes. That's unhealthy. Brian didn't respond. The truth was, he had no idea what his mother might have been feeling all these years. When was the last time he'd really asked her about her life, her dreams, her disappointments? When was the last time he'd seen her as Donna, the woman? Rather than just Mom, the perpetual support system? At home, the chaos that had become their new normal greeted them. Dirty dishes filled the sink. Laundry sat in unfolded piles on the living room couch. Their teenagers, Emma and Jason, were sprawled. In front of the TV, surrounded by snack wrappers and empty soda cans. Did you find Grandma? Emma asked, looking up from her phone. No, honey. Still no sign of her, Brian replied, surveying the mess with growing frustration. I miss her, Jason said quietly. The house is always a disaster now. Well, excuse me for working full-time and not being your maid, Amelia snapped, dropping her purse on the cluttered kitchen counter. Grandma worked full-time too, Emma pointed out. She still kept her house nice and made us cookies and helped with my science projects. Your grandmother didn't have a real career, Amelia retorted. Being a nurse isn't the same as executive management. Brian felt something twist inside him. Mom was the head nurse of the entire emergency department, Amelia. She supervised 40 people and saved countless lives. Amelia waved her hand dismissively. You know what I mean. It's not like she had the pressures I deal with. No, she just had to raise me alone after Dad died, work night shifts, and somehow make it to every baseball game and school play. The words came out sharper than Brian intended. An uncomfortable silence fell over the kitchen. Emma and Jason exchanged glances, unused to hearing their father challenge their mother. What's gotten into you? Amelia finally asked. You act like I'm the villain here. I'm not the one who abandoned this family without a word. Brian ran a hand through his hair. Mom didn't abandon us. She left a note. She's an adult who decided to take a trip. Without saying goodbye? Without telling anyone where she was going? That's not normal behavior, Brian. He couldn't argue with that. It wasn't like his mother to be so cryptic, so independent. Had something been building that he'd failed to notice? His mind drifted back to Mother's Day, the last time they'd all been together. The memory of Amelia's toast suddenly hit him with new clarity. To the old lady who's going to take a vacation in a nursing home. Everyone had laughed, including him. But had his mother? He tried to recall her expression, the look in her eyes. Had she smiled genuinely, or had that tight-lipped expression been masking hurt? I need to call Aunt Patricia again, he said suddenly. You've called her 10 times, Amelia sighed. She doesn't know anything. She's hiding something. I can feel it. Later that night, after Amelia and the kids had gone to bed, Brian sat alone in the dark kitchen, scrolling through old photos on his phone. There weren't many recent ones of his mother, he realized. She was always the one taking the pictures, not in them. He found one from last Christmas, his mother standing slightly apart from the family, holding a present they'd given her. What was it again? He couldn't remember, but the smile on her face didn't reach her eyes. On impulse, he called. His aunt again, not caring about the late hour. Brian? Patricia answered, her voice alert despite the time. Is everything okay? No, he admitted. Nothing's okay. Mom's been gone for 3 months. She's never been out of contact this long. I'm worried, Aunt Patricia. I need to know if she's safe. A long silence followed. Aunt Patricia? Are you there? She's safe, Brian. His aunt's voice was gentle but firm. That's all I can tell you. Relief flooded through him, followed immediately by confusion. So you do know where she is? Why won't you tell me? Because she asked me not to. She needs this time, Brian. She's earned it. But why? What did I do wrong? Patricia sighed. It's not about one thing, sweetheart. It's about years of little things adding up. When was the last time you called your mother just to check on her? Not to ask for babysitting or money or favors, but just to see how she was doing. The question hit him like a physical blow. He couldn't remember. I know Amelia's been difficult for your mother to deal with, Patricia continued carefully. And I know you've always taken Amelia's side. That's not true, Brian protested. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were a lie. How many times had he dismissed his mother's hurt feelings? How often had he rationalized Amelia's cutting remarks as just her way? Do you remember? When your mother wanted to host Thanksgiving last year, and Amelia insisted it wouldn't be special enough at her house? Patricia asked. Or when she suggested your mother dye her hair because the gray was aging her terribly? Or when she reorganized your mother's kitchen during that week you stayed there when your house was being painted? Each example landed like a stone in Brian's stomach. He remembered them all. And worse, he remembered staying silent, letting these small cruelties pass unchallenged. Oh, God, he whispered. I've been a terrible son. Not terrible, Patricia corrected gently. Just blind. And now your mother is finally doing something for herself, probably for the first time since your father died. She deserves this chance, Brian. Let her have it. After hanging up, Brian sat motionless in the dark kitchen. The house around him, chaotic, disorganized, tense, was a testament to all his mother had quietly managed for years. The meals she'd cooked, the laundry she'd done, the childcare she'd provided, the money she'd lent without expectation of repayment. All while being treated as an afterthought, a burden, a joke. For the first time in his adult life, Brian Mitchell began to see his mother clearly, not as the eternal support system he'd taken for granted, but as a woman who had sacrificed her own dreams and needs for decades, only to be rewarded with disrespect and ingratitude. And now she was gone, reclaiming her life somewhere far away. Without him. The realization broke something open inside him. Silent tears slid down his face as he finally understood what he had lost, not just his mother's presence, but her trust, her belief that he valued her. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered to the empty room. "I'm so sorry." The Mediterranean sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks as I stood on the ship's deck, my hands steady on the railing. 5 months had passed since I'd left home, 5 months of self-discovery and healing. My skin had darkened from days spent under foreign suns, and my hair, which I'd let grow, now fell in soft waves past my shoulders, the silver strands catching the fading light. "There you are," Ruth said, appearing beside me. "I've been looking everywhere. They've sold another one of your paintings." I turned to her in surprise. "Which one?" "The stormy seascape with that tiny boat in the distance." She handed me an envelope. "The gentleman paid quite handsomely for it. Said it reminded him of his own journey through grief." I opened the envelope, stunned by the amount written on the check inside. 3 of my paintings had sold in the ship's gallery over the past months, but none for a sum this substantial. "This is too much," I murmured. Ruth shook her head firmly. "No, it's exactly right. Your work speaks to people, Donna. It's raw and honest in a way professional artists spend years trying to achieve." I slipped the check into my pocket, still not fully believing this new reality where strangers valued my art, where I was known not as someone's mother or grandmother, but as a painter with something meaningful to say. "Have you thought about what's next?" Ruth asked gently. "We dock in New York in 3 weeks." The question hung between us, heavy with implication. For 5 months, I'd existed in this floating sanctuary, postponing decisions about my future. Now, as our journey neared its end, I could no longer avoid the question. "I've been thinking about Santa Fe," I admitted. "Remember that gallery owner we met in Barcelona? The one who said the light in New Mexico would suit my painting style?" Ruth nodded, her eyes bright with approval. She gave me her card. Said if I ever wanted to visit, she could arrange a small exhibition of my work. I took a deep breath. I called her yesterday. And she still wants to see my portfolio. She knows a place I could rent, a small adobe house with good northern light for a studio. Ruth clasped her hands together. "Donna, that's wonderful. Have you told your family?" The mention of my family sent a familiar pang through my chest, though duller now than before. "Not yet. I'm not sure I'm ready for that conversation." Truth was, I'd been keeping track of them from a distance. Patricia sent me weekly updates, reluctantly at first, then with increasing detail as she saw how I was changing. Brian had called her nearly every day in the beginning, frantic to know where I was. Then, as weeks turned to months, the tenor of his calls had shifted from panicked to reflective. He'd started asking questions about my life, about the years after his father died, about the choices I'd made. Patricia told me he'd started therapy. The most recent development had surprised even her. Brian had moved out of the house, taking the children with him. Amelia's behavior, Patricia reported, had become increasingly erratic and controlling. After discovering she'd been secretly spending their savings on luxury items, Brian had finally reached his breaking point. "There's something different about him," Patricia had told me during our last call. "It's like he's finally seeing clearly for the first time. He asks about you every time we talk, not demanding information, just wanting to know if you're happy, if you're safe." Part of me ached to reach out to him, to tell him about my journey, the friends I'd made, the art I'd created. But another part, the newly empowered woman who had emerged during these months at sea, knew I wasn't quite ready. I needed to be firmly rooted in my new identity before I could face the old relationships that had nearly erased me. "I'll tell them when I'm settled," I told Ruth, turning back to the sunset. When I have something solid to share. Later that evening, as we dined with our small group of friends, now inseparable after months of shared adventures, Elizabeth raised her glass in a toast. To Donna, our resident artist, about to embark on yet another brave new chapter. As glasses clinked around the table, I felt a swell of gratitude for these women who had helped me rediscover my voice. Margaret with her wry humor, Helen with her practical wisdom, Sophia with her boundless optimism, Elizabeth with her maternal warmth, and Ruth, dear Ruth, with her unwavering belief in my talent. I couldn't have done this without all of you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Nonsense, Ruth replied firmly. You had it in you all along. We just held up a mirror. That night in my cabin, I opened my laptop and, for the first time in 5 months, composed an email to my son. Dear Brian, I'm well and safe. I've been on a journey, both literally and figuratively, discovering parts of myself I'd forgotten existed. In 3 weeks, our ship returns to New York. From there, I'll be heading to Santa Fe to pursue an opportunity that has presented itself. I'm not ready to come home yet. Maybe I never will be, at least not to the home and life I left behind. But I am ready to start rebuilding our relationship, if that's something you want too. We have much to talk about, but not through emails or phone calls. When I'm settled in Santa Fe, perhaps you could visit. Just you at first. I hope you and the children are well. Love, Mom. I stared at the screen for a long time before pressing send. Then I closed my laptop and walked to the small easel set up by my balcony door, where a half-finished painting waited. A desert landscape inspired by photographs of Santa Fe, rendered in bold strokes of ochre, turquoise, and burnt sienna. My new beginning, taking shape before my eyes. Meanwhile, across the country, Brian sat alone in his new apartment, surrounded by moving boxes. The children were asleep in their shared bedroom, a temporary arrangement until he could find a more suitable place. The past month had been a whirlwind of painful realizations, difficult conversations, and finally, decisive action. The separation from Amelia had been ugly, but necessary. Her mask had slipped completely when he'd questioned their finances, revealing a side of her he could no longer ignore or excuse. The verbal abuse she'd unleashed, first at him, then at the children, when they'd sided with him, had made his decision clear. Emma and Jason had been surprisingly resilient. It's like we can breathe again, Emma had confessed the day they moved out. Mom was always so angry, especially after Grandma left. Those words had hit Brian like a physical blow. Had his children been suffering in silence all this time? Had he been as blind to their pain as he'd been to his mother's? He glanced at his phone as it chimed with a new email notification. Seeing the sender's name, his heart nearly stopped. Mom. With trembling hands, he opened the message and read it twice, 3 times. She was safe. She was well. She wasn't coming back, at least not to her old life, but she was willing to see him. Tears blurred his vision as relief and hope flooded through him. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a chance he hadn't been sure he deserved. He composed his reply carefully, pouring his heart into each word. Dear Mom, you can't. Imagine how good it is to hear from you. These months without you have taught me more than I can express in an email. I've been forced to see how poorly I treated you, how I allowed Amelia to disrespect you, how I took for granted all you've done for us. There have been big changes here. Amelia and I have separated. The kids and I moved out last month. It's been hard but necessary. I would love to visit you in Santa Fe. Just tell me when. I have so much to say to you, so much to apologize for. But mostly, I want to get to know you. Not just as my mother, but as Donna, the woman I realize I never truly saw before. We all miss you terribly, but I understand why you needed to go. I hope someday you can forgive me for being so blind, for so long. All my love. Brian. He pressed send, then walked to the window, gazing out at the night sky and wondering if his mother was looking at the same stars, somewhere on a ship in distant waters. For the first time in months, he felt something like peace. The journey ahead would be long and uncertain, but at least now there was a path forward, for both of them. The autumn light in Santa Fe was exactly as the gallery owner had described. Crystalline and golden, casting everything it touched in a warm, ethereal glow. My small adobe house sat on the edge of town, its terracotta walls blending seamlessly with the desert landscape. Behind it stretched miles of open sky and rugged terrain, a vista so different from the familiar suburbs I'd left behind that sometimes I still caught myself staring in wonder. 3 months had passed since I'd stepped off the cruise ship, said tearful goodbyes to Ruth and the others, and boarded a plane to New Mexico. 3 months of setting up my new home, converting the sunroom into a painting studio, and preparing for my first small exhibition at Mariana's gallery. Today was the day. In just a few hours, 12 of my paintings would be displayed for public viewing. And tomorrow, Brian would arrive for his first visit. My hands trembled slightly as I fastened the turquoise necklace I'd bought at a local artisan market around my neck. The woman in the mirror looked nothing like the Donna who had slipped away from her life 6 months ago. This woman stood straighter, her eyes clearer, her smile more genuine. The silver in her hair caught the light, no longer something to be hidden, but a crown to be worn with pride. "You can do this," I told my reflection, adjusting the flowing linen tunic I'd chosen for the evening. The drive to the gallery took me through the historic plaza, now decorated for fall with golden lights and vibrant mums. Tourists and locals mingled on the sidewalks, ducking in and out of shops selling handcrafted jewelry, pottery, and textiles. This place had embraced me, a stranger, with an openness I'd found both surprising and healing. Mariana met me at the Yai gallery door, elegant in black with her silver hair swept into a chic knot. "Donna, right on time. Come see how we've arranged everything." She led me through the main gallery space to a smaller room at the back. "I call this the Discovery Room," she explained. "It's where I showcase emerging artists I believe in." We turned the corner. I gasped. My paintings lined the walls, beautifully lit and professionally framed. Each one a piece of my soul I'd poured onto canvas during my months at sea and my first weeks in Santa Fe. They look. I couldn't find the words. "Important," Mariana finished for me. "Because they are. Your work has something many trained artists lack: authenticity, raw emotion, truth." Tears pricked my eyes. "Thank you for taking a chance on me." She squeezed my hand. "Thank you for taking a chance on yourself." The evening passed in a blur of introductions, conversations, and to my astonishment, red, sold dots appearing beside 7 of my paintings. Art collectors, tourists, local artists, all offered congratulations and business cards. One woman, the owner of a small hotel, commissioned 3 pieces for her lobby. By the time the last guest departed, I felt both exhilarated and exhausted. Mariana handed me a final glass of champagne, and we sat together in comfortable silence among my remaining unsold works. "I'd say that was a successful debut," she said finally, raising her glass. "To many more." I clinked my glass against hers, still not quite believing this was my life now. "I keep waiting to wake up," I admitted. To find myself back in my old house with my old routines invisible again. Mariana studied me with wise eyes. "But that woman doesn't exist anymore, does she? Even if you went back to that house, those routines, you'd never be invisible again, because you've seen yourself clearly now." Her words resonated deeply. It was true. No matter what happened next, I could never return to being the person I was before. The woman who silently accepted disrespect, who put everyone's needs before her own, who had forgotten she had dreams of her own. My son arrives tomorrow, I said, changing the subject. It will be the first time I've seen him in 9 months. Are you nervous? I nodded. Terrified, actually. We've exchanged emails, had a few phone calls, but face to face. I trailed off, unable to articulate the complex emotions swirling within. Me? You're afraid you'll fall back into old patterns, Mariana suggested gently. Yes. And I'm afraid of what I'll see in his eyes. Resentment? Disappointment? Judgment? Or perhaps understanding. Growth. Respect. She stood, gathering our empty glasses. Either way, you'll face it as the woman you are now, not the woman you were then. The next morning dawned clear and bright. I'd arranged to meet Brian at a small cafe near the plaza, a neutral ground for our reunion. As I drove there, my heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. I arrived early, choosing a table on the patio with a view of the mountains. The waiter had just brought my tea when I saw him, my son, walking hesitantly toward the cafe, looking around, with nervous eyes. He'd lost weight. His hair was longer, curling slightly at the collar of his blue button-down shirt. He moved differently. Too. Less of the confident stride I remembered, more careful, more aware. Then he saw me, and for a moment, we both froze, taking each other in across the distance. I stood as he approached, unsure of the proper protocol for this unprecedented situation. Should I hug him? Shake his hand? Simply nod in greeting? Brian solved the dilemma by wrapping his arms around me in a fierce embrace, his face buried in my shoulder. Mom, he whispered, his voice breaking. Oh God, Mom, I'm so sorry. I held him tightly, my own tears flowing freely now. I've missed you, I managed to say. We stood like that for a long moment, oblivious to the curious glances from other patrons. Finally, we separated and sat down, both wiping our eyes and trying to compose ourselves. You look amazing, Brian said, studying my face. There's something different about you. Not just the hair or the clothes, but something in your eyes. I feel different, I admitted. More myself than I have in decades. He nodded, understanding in his gaze. I want to hear everything. About the cruise, about your art, about this place. But first, I need to say some things. I took a sip of my tea, bracing myself. I'm listening. What happened on Mother's Day? Amelia's toast, everyone laughing, me joining in. It was unforgivable. But it wasn't isolated. It was just the culmination of years of me allowing you to be disrespected, taken for granted, treated as an afterthought. He reached across the table, tentatively taking my hand. I was blind, Mom. So blind to what was happening in my own home, to how Amelia was treating you, to how I was failing you. The raw honesty in his voice touched something deep inside me. This wasn't the defensive, dismissive son I'd left behind. This was a man who had done some serious soul-searching. Your leaving was the wake-up call I needed, he continued. At first, I was just angry and confused, but then I started really thinking about why you'd go to such extremes. What would drive my reliable, selfless mother to walk away without warning? It wasn't one thing, I said softly. It was 1,000 tiny cuts over many years. I know that now. And I'm not asking for forgiveness yet. I haven't earned it. I'm just asking for a chance to be part of your new life, to get to know the real you, and to show you the person I'm trying to become. I squeezed his hand, my heart full. I'd like that. Over the next 3 hours, we talked more openly than we had in years. Brian told me about his separation from Amelia, his decision to seek therapy, his struggles and triumphs as a single father. I shared stories from my journey, the friends I'd made, the places I'd seen, the art I'd created. Emma and Jason would love to see you, he said as our conversation wound down. When you're ready, no pressure. I smiled, genuinely warmed by the thought of my grandchildren. I'd love to see them too. Maybe they could visit during their spring break. Santa Fe is beautiful in April. They'd like that. He hesitated, then added, and I've been thinking about relocating, starting fresh somewhere new. My company has an office in Albuquerque. The implication hung between us, that he wanted to be closer, to rebuild our family on new terms, with new boundaries and new respect. Let's take it one step at a time, I suggested gently. We're both still healing, still finding our way. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Whatever happens, I want you to know how proud I am of you, Mom, for having the courage to choose yourself, for building this new life, for showing me what strength really looks like. As we walked together through the plaza afterward, the setting, sun painting the adobe buildings in shades of gold and rose, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible. The woman who had fled her life 9 months ago, wounded and invisible, had found her voice, her passion, her worth. And the son who had once looked through her was finally seeing her clearly. We stopped at Mariana's gallery so I could show Brian my exhibition. He moved slowly from painting to painting, taking in each one with careful attention. "These are incredible, Mom," he said finally, turning to me with genuine awe. "You've always been creative, but this is on another level." "Thank you," I said simply, accepting the compliment without deflection, another new skill I'd developed. As we stood together in that quiet gallery space, surrounded by the tangible evidence of my transformation, I realized something profound. I had not just found a new home in Santa Fe, not just discovered a new passion in painting. I had found myself, the woman who had been waiting patiently all these years for me to remember she existed. And that was a harbor no storm could ever disturb again. Now I'm curious about you, who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.